In this podcast, two Gen Xers are taking a trip down memory lane, revisiting and reflecting on the cinema of the 1980s. We'll look at the hits and the flops, the studio blockbusters and art house indies, the critically acclaimed, and the universally reviled. The series is hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli, a writer and librarian, and features Dustin Morrow, a filmmaker, author, and professor of film. So pull on your legwarmers, crank up your boombox, and hop in the DeLorean. It's time for the long rewind. Welcome to the long rewind. I'm Lisa, and with me as always is Dustin, and we're here to talk to you about the films of the second half of 1983. Hello, Dustin.
Hello, let's get into it.
Yeah.
What are some of the key films you found in the second half of 1983?
Yeah, well, I think you're a little better at picking out the key films, but I'll get us started. I had Mr. Mom as one of them. You want to talk about Mr. Mom a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we had talked just about the emergence of John Hughes,
in
who
our
was
last episode.
started out as an ad executive and wrote comedy pieces for the National Lampoon magazine. One of those he wrote was about a family vacation that his family took when he was young and where everything went wrong. And that was translated into the movie National Lampoon's Vacation with Chevy Chase. And he also wrote this year Mr. Mom. And so this is him getting started, and what we're going to see immediately going into next year. He's going to start to direct films and make some of the great classics of the 80s. But he, arguably started as early as 83 because these are two classic movies.
Oh, definitely.
Vacation is the obvious classic because it launched so many sequels and a remake. And so Mr. Mom is somewhat lesser known, but I think kind of fondly remembered. There's probably some politics in it that I'm sure somebody today would throw a fit about. But I remember it mainly as a really funny movie and a great Michael Keaton performance.
Yeah.
And I love Terry Garr. And
yeah, she's great.
It's a story that was big in that era. Men for the first time, really staying home and not being the breadwinners in their families. And it was done by John Hughes as essentially a fish out of water story, where, it was playing with a lot of kind of classic, stereotypical ideas about husbands and wives and, keeping house,
taking care of kids and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, that was a thing in that era. Phyllis Diller, was a older comedian, and her whole, she wrote books, and her
Irma
whole
Bombeck too,
stand up was that.
Yeah.
Irma Bombeck was doing that. It was that was a big
thing. It sure was.
I mean, Roseanne kind of came out of that, right?
Yeah.
She was the domestic goddess. That was her.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's what she called herself.
Yeah.
The domestic goddess. When she emerged as a stand-up comedian. And it was certainly a thing in sitcoms, right? Who's the Boss with Tony Danza as the housekeeper.
Yeah.
And Judith Blight's the high earning.
The corporate high earning.
Yeah, exactly. Ad
executive. Yeah.
So
it was flipping the script.
It was a thing.
It was definitely a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, also of note, I heard you mention this, and in Mr. Mom, doesn't he lose his job at an automotive factory or something? And that was kind of a big thing in the 80s.
It was. There were a lot of
small point, but
a lot of car companies were moving their basis of manufacturing to Mexico. So I mean, there was another comedy, an early Ron Howard comedy that came out a few years later. I want to say 85, that was called Gung Ho.
Oh yeah,
which was kind of about that.
Yeah. So I don't know, just worth mentioning as a big thing in the 80s for sure.
Yeah.
Well, then how about Risky Business? That's a pretty key film of the 80s, but it came out in 1983. So let's talk about Risky Business.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies that was if the aliens landed tomorrow and said, sum up the 80s for us, and you only had time to show them 4 or 5 movies, that would be one of them for me. Like Wall Street.
Yeah, so let's just explain what Risky Business is about. Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead?
I'll try.
We just watched it recently.
We did. So Risky Business is about, I don't remember well, first of all, Tom Cruise is the lead. Joel, right. Joel Goodson is his name, actually.
Goodson,
which becomes obviously symbolic. Joel Goodson is the lead. He's sort of a stressed out, high-achieving A-type high school student in the Chicagoland area, and his parents go away on vacation, leave him with the house, and this sort of A-type stressful lifestyle he's been leading kind of begins to unravel at the behest of his friend
Curtis Armstrong.
Curtis Armstrong plays his friend, and kind of he kind of eggs him on to like.
Well, he eggs him on to hire a prostitute. Yeah, essentially. And she comes out and she ends up stealing from him and also setting up camp in his house and like just turning his life upside down.
His life just kind of gets turned upside down, and he starts to think about, in a weird way, I think maybe what he wants out of life. I don't know. What else would you say?
It's an absolutely vicious takedown of 80s yuppieism and consumerism, and the idea that your self-worth is married to how much money you make.
Yeah, 100%.
There's a scene early in the movie where Tom Cruise is sitting with his high school pals, one of whom is played by Bronson Pinchot, who went on to play Balky on Perfect Strangers, among many other things.
I'd forgotten he was
Serge in Beverly Hills Cop.
Yep.
Where, he's like, what do you guys want to do after you go to college? And they're like, make money. And he's like, yeah, but what do you want to What do you want to be? Like, do you want to be a lawyer? What do you want to be? And they're like, it doesn't matter. We just want to make money. And his parents are completely status obsessed. His dad drives a Porsche that he's not allowed to touch. His mom has this crystal egg that becomes central to the plot, but is also just this like obviously decorative piece of like nothing that she seems to like value more than her relationship with her son at some points in the movie.
He has to protect it with his life, basically.
Yeah.
Or he's feels that he has to. Yeah.
He's also like going through during the narrative of the movie a school project where he's supposed to create a product and then market it and try to sell it, and then he has to present a report on that at the end of the term.
Right.
Like there's just all this stuff in there about yuppieism and
how business was so important in the 80s and making money and the market and
I mean that's sort of what the 80s have kind of become famous for, right? Is that sort of money-centric pursuit, and all of the media, the music videos, Miami Vice, the glossy films that were coming out, the new wave music.
Yep.
Like it was all about,
excess.
Yeah, excess and surfaces and the criticisms of that era as being very shallow and very appearance obsessed are fair. We wouldn't be devoting a whole podcast to the decade if we didn't think there was much more there. And Risky Business is one of the many movies you can look at that was seeing that and saying, hey, like this isn't right, and addressing it with comedy and satire.
And a lot of style.
In a way that's really smart. Yeah, we haven't really talked about it as an aesthetic object.
It's so
but
aesthetically
it's just
wonderful.
It's a really great screenplay. It's written and directed by a guy named Paul Brickman, who sadly didn't go on to make a ton else after this.
That's too bad.
But it's just a great movie. And so on top of like its smart script and the great performances in it, Cruise is like very funny and phenomenal in it. And all the supporting actors are great too. It has just a really great supporting cast of character actors and future stars. It's also just this aesthetic piece of thing
Oh,
of beauty.
man. It
Like
really
the
is.
photography is
Yeah.
moody. It's like film noir in
Yeah.
color. Almost it's like neon drenched. It uses Chicago in ways that
Mm-hmm.
no film has done before or since, I don't think. The music by Tangerine Dream is
Yeah.
like really dreamy and beautiful and moody, and it's just an inherently cool movie
Oh,
on top of
yeah. To
everything
look at.
else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can watch this movie just for the surface, but realize there's a lot going on there. I'm sure a lot of people watch it and think, oh, that's
Yeah.
wrong. but it's really trying to make a point.
So I taught a course some years ago on teen movies of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly a class about John Hughes, but I showed my students Risky Business, and they reacted pretty negatively to it because
Yeah.
of and I feel like, I don't want to say they just didn't get it, because that's underselling their, they're smart kids,
Well,
but
yeah,
they couldn't get past the
right.
fact that he essentially became a pimp. Like
He
he runs a
brothel out
brothel.
of his
Yeah,
house,
he turns his
yeah.
house into a brothel. What I think they maybe missed is that that's part of the satire of the film. Of course, that's what he has to become. He's essentially peddling human fulfillment through human flesh. And that's just very 80s. Like that's I don't know how you can get more sort of satirical of the 80s than
and you
that
think
idea.
about, he's been told he needs to find a product and market it and sell it. I mean, and then you're seeing him run this brothel, which is not part of his project, but you're thinking of that as you're watching him do it.
But he also, the women in that movie have total control of what happens in that movie.
And major entrepreneurial mindsets. I mean, they are entrepreneurs.
There are no sort of stereotypes of,
that's true.
Quote unquote working girls in that film. Like they're all very like savvy about their business, and it's not, there's no sort of cliches that are leaned on.
No, not really.
In portraying those characters.
Yeah. It's fabulous. I recommend it.
Yeah.
For sure. What else should we talk about as key films for 1983?
It's not a movie I like, but it was a big deal. A movie called The Big Chill.
Yep. I've never seen this movie.
Yeah, you're not missing much.
It's a big deal.
It's a key film for boomers.
Yeah.
And I hate to be dismissive of it, but like,
I mean, that's fine. We're just not boomers, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. And like, I don't know. It's sort of like one of those narratives about how they were the Woodstock generation and then they essentially turned into what we were just talking about, right?
Yep.
Like how does the same group of people like go to being like anti-Vietnam, peace and love, to I just want to devote my whole life to making as much money and driving as nice a car as I can. And
Woodstock
how does
to
that
Wall Street,
how does that kind of
basically.
change happen within a generation?
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting. If it tackled that in a way that I thought was really interesting, I would say it was a movie that's definitely worth watching, but it isn't really, because it's kind of just done as this sort of like soap operatic
I mean, it's a bunch of friends getting together and on a weekend or something, right?
Yeah, they get together, they listen to Motown. It's a lot of famous actors. Like
I was going to say,
really good actors.
It's influential that way. Lots of big time, or they will be big actors, and a really good soundtrack. As I
really like
it.
Lawrence Kasdan. I'm a huge Lawrence Kasdan fan. I actually think the movie,
he
did another movie about 10 years later that deals with some of the same themes in ways that are, I think, far smarter. It's a 90s movie, so we won't be talking about it on this podcast, but I recommend it anyway. It's called Grand Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really good movie.
That is a good movie.
Never Cry Wolf was a live action Disney movie that came out this year that was important in some ways. Star 80, which was the true story of Dorothy Stratton, the Playboy playmate who was murdered by her, not sure if he was her husband or just her boyfriend. But it's notable mostly, it was directed by Bob Fosse. It's an absolutely brutal movie.
Wow.
It's talk about no fun, but it's not fun to watch for a second. But it has a really great performance by Eric Roberts
Hmm.
as her boyfriend or husband. I'm drawing a blank as to what their relationship was exactly. But essentially, like, he controls her career, and when she starts to get too big for him, he doesn't react well and tries to exert control. And when he can't do that, he ends up killing her. A very sad true story.
I probably won't be moving that to my to be seen list.
Another true story from this year that was important was Silkwood.
Yep.
Meryl Streep plays a whistleblower at a nuclear plant. Not a real fun movie to watch, but it's well made. Mike Nichols directed it. The Right Stuff.
Yeah, I had that on my list too.
Is a phenomenal movie about the early days of space exploration and the early Apollo astronauts. It's like 3 hours long, but you wouldn't know it because it moves really fast. It's just super fun. It's kind of really a rollicking movie. It's like a real feel good movie.
Yeah. It's fun to watch those guys together too, these guys playing these astronauts.
Yeah, Sam Shepard and Ed. Why am I blanking on his name?
I can't think.
Married to Amy Madigan.
Ed Harris.
Yeah, great actors all around. Dennis Quaid is really funny in it. Fred Ward.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, super fun movie. A Christmas Story came out this year. Of course, that's become the seminal Christmas movie. TBS runs
Plays 24 hours or something.
It's almost become like bigger than a movie. It feels like in some ways, and so I think it's sometimes easy to forget how good it is.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's
how
almost
well made it is,
like a icon, and it's hard. I think that's true.
What some people who don't spend all their time thinking about movies might not know that's kind of interesting is that it was made by a guy named Bob Clark who directed Black Christmas. Another classic Christmas movie that it couldn't be further away from a Christmas
movie,
Story
right?
in terms of its themes and its mode of address. It's a pretty wild slasher film. In fact, it's like some people say it's the first slasher film, and that it's the film that inspired John Carpenter's Halloween.
Like he felt he needed to balance the universe.
Yeah, I don't
Black
know.
Christmas and a Christmas Story.
I don't know how the guy that made Black Christmas ends up making the ultimate kind of nostalgia, gentle comedy. But there you go.
Weird.
Cujo kind of made a splash that year. It's a Stephen King adaptation about a woman and her son get trapped in a car by a rabid Saint Bernard. Done without CGI, so they had to just they had these Saint Bernards and they covered them in muck and blood and tried to make them look as violent as they could. And it's a really quite well directed and very intense movie. And E. Wallace, who played the mom in E.T., plays the lead in it, and she's fantastic because so much of the stress of the movie has to be sold through her performance, and she's great in it. And it's a movie I watch and I just can't imagine how unpleasant that must have been to shoot as an actor, because it looks hot as hell. I'm sure that a lot of that's manufactured. They're spraying sweat on her, but even so, she spends the entire movie in full sun in a small car, screaming and panicking.
Oh gosh.
And if it takes 3 months to make a movie, like doing that,
and that's most of the movie,
doing that
right?
14 hours a day for like months on end, I can only imagine it'd be really.
Oof.
And Sudden Impact came out this year. That's the Dirty Harry movie where he says "Make My Day."
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the "Make My Day" actually came from, I think it's the third film in the series, maybe the fourth.
Oh, that's funny.
Let me think.
Yeah.
Dirty Harry, and then Magnum Force, and then The Enforcer, and then Sudden Impact. So it was the fourth.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's what we all know Dirty Harry for.
Yeah.
That's
Everybody thinks he says it in every movie, but it wasn't until the fourth.
Nope.
Yeah.
Wow,
It's actually a pretty solid serial killer, like revenge thriller too. It's one of the better Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
What did I miss? What did you have?
Well,
on your list?
Terms of Endearment.
Yeah.
That would be a big deal.
Yeah.
In 1983.
Have you seen Terms of Endearment?
I have seen it. Yeah, that's although I'm blanking on who's
Shirley MacLaine and Deborah
Shirley
Winger.
MacLaine and Deborah Winger
And Jack Nicholson.
Mom,
Who
daughter.
I think won an Academy Award.
Yeah, we'll find out in a little while.
Yeah,
but,
I guess we will.
I don't know, what would you call it? A comedy drama?
Yeah, it's a dramedy.
Dramedy. Yeah,
It's great. It's a tearjerker.
Mm-hmm.
It's very good. You know, it's
is.
so sad in the last half hour that it's like not a movie you pop on for fun all the time, but it's a really good movie.
Our friends at the Dodge Movie Podcast do an episode about it if you want to hear more. Yeah, that was one. I also had Scarface, which is one of those movies I've never seen, but seems important. Of course, I know it's important. I just
central to hip hop culture.
Yeah,
right? Like
and lots of other
every rapper of the last 30 years.
Yeah,
love like their favorite movie is Scarface. There was a whole episode. Do you remember that show Cribs on MTV?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a whole episode of that show that was just about Scarface memorabilia and decor in rappers' mansions.
Yeah.
And it was wild, like what some of them had done to their houses to pay homage to that movie.
Well, I guess most people probably know what Scarface is, but do you want to mention anything about Scarface?
It's a remake of an old, I want to say James Cagney movie from the 30s, but redone in the sort of context of, you know, Cuban immigrants and drugs. Yeah, in the 80s. It's a very 80s movie. Like
Michelle
there's a lot of
in it, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of cocaine flying all over the place in that movie. And
Al Pacino plays
Al Pacino
Scarface, I think.
giving one of his like biggest Al Pacino performances.
Yeah,
you know, he's just hamming it up, and Michelle Pfeiffer it's like one of her earliest movies, like things she did after Grease too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know. So that seemed important.
You've never seen it, right?
I have not.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I suppose I should someday.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah. So I don't know. Anything else on our key films? I mean, there's a lot of hidden gems to talk about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there were some movies that weren't hits, but I think are kind of remembered for one reason or another. Rumblefish is a really almost experimental film that's another S.E. Hinton adaptation by Coppola. It's a black and white. It's really beautiful and kind of just a very weird movie.
I'd like to see that. I should put that on my list.
You would probably like it. All the Right Moves is a football drama with Tom Cruise.
Big Tom Cruise year this year.
Yeah. Famous, I think, because they talk about it in Scream, in the original Scream, because Tom Cruise has a full frontal nude scene in it. And the characters in Scream, the girls are talking about how great that is. Testament, which is a really low budget movie about the after effects of a nuclear detonation, and it's set in like, I want to say it's like Kansas or someplace in the Midwest, and it's just a really sad movie about a woman whose children die one by one from radiation poisoning.
Oh boy.
And she has to bury them on her property. It's really quite bleak, but it's a good movie. And Two of a Kind, which was a terrible flop, but like was a film that got a lot of attention because it was the big follow-up for Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta.
Oh boy, I have seen this. I'd forgotten.
He's like he's like an angel, I think, and comes down to earth to help her. I don't know what he helped to help her for some reason.
I don't even know.
They fall in love, of course. Yeah. He invents like edible sunglasses. It's
episode.
Crazy. It's a crazy movie. It's got a few good songs in it by her. She
that's
true. She did the soundtrack, and I think the soundtrack was actually a big hit, but nobody saw the movie. And there's a reason for that. It's really bad.
I just have to say, if you remember from last episode, if you heard last episode, we talked about the concept of the blank square, which is just like stuff in movies that you're like, what am I even looking at? What is this thing? This whole movie is honestly kind of a blank square.
Yeah. I mean, especially the edible sunglasses.
The edible sunglasses, guys.
Yeah. It's a product you didn't know you needed.
I don't even know.
When the sun goes down, you can have a snack, I guess. I don't know if that's the idea.
I don't remember why they were edible or anyway.
What about unsung gems? Anything you want to recommend? Smaller movies or cult movies?
Certainly. I mean, there are some here I feel like you should talk about, but let's talk about Eddie and the Cruisers, which is maybe one of my favorite movies, and is certainly a hidden gem of 1983.
Yeah. Tell me
Let's do
about
it. Eddie and the Cruisers is a most wonderful film about a rock and roll band from like the Jersey Shore, South Jersey when did they were around like in the 60s, I guess.
Early 60s.
Early 60s, right, early 60s. And they kind of have a meteoric rise, but then their lead singer, Eddie, either dies or disappears. People aren't sure. And maybe 20 years later in the 80s, people are questioning what happened to him. And, I'm doing a very bad job of explaining this. Do you want to say more about Eddie and the Cruisers?
Well, it centers on a mystery element where
right.
he was recording his second album on the night that he disappeared, and the tapes went missing that night, and nobody knows what happened to those tapes, but they are said to be this strange, misunderstood masterpiece, this
kind of
music that he was making. And so
Limbo.
there's this drive by multiple characters in the movie, including a documentary filmmaker played by Ellen Barkin, but also members of the band and the band's former manager, to find these tapes because they could potentially be worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the movie is told in part through flashbacks. It slides back and forth throughout the entire runtime between the unfolding of that mystery in the present day, the present day being 83, and the band's sort of rise and fall and the problems that the band was having in the early 60s.
Yep.
And it's a musical full of phenomenal music that somehow feels both contemporary to the early 80s and the 60s.
Yeah, it's so good, the music.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite soundtracks from the 80s. The music is great, but it also is just this kind of great mashup of like an old rock and roll movie that you would see with like Elvis or Marlon Brando or something, and a film noir-esque mystery.
Yeah. Well, it's another one of those movies that I think just creates a great mood, like the mood and the scenes of this, or what am I trying to say? That the mood and the setting of this movie, I just think are wonderful and so well done. In the same way we get things like Risky Business this year that have a wonderful mood and setting to them, I think Eddie and the Cruisers also has that. You've got sort of the rain-soaked neon streets of the Jersey Shore. You've got, I don't know, it's just wonderful.
Yeah, it's a great sense of place.
Great sense of place. Yeah. Eddie and the Cruisers. I love it.
And it gets in and gets out. It's like barely 90 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And it feels fast. Yeah. It's a super fun movie for people that like film noir or, rock
or good
movies,
music.
Rock and roll movies.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, there's another one I would mention from this year that has all of the same exact attributes, which is Christine, John Carpenter's adaptation of the Stephen King bestseller.
Love Christine.
Yeah, which of course is, most people probably know, but it's about a car which essentially is kind of possessed by something.
We're not sure
something
what.
Evil.
Something supernatural. Yeah,
but it's quintessential Carpenter because it's beautifully shot. It feels really controlled. It moves really fast. Great performances, but it also has this just this cool 1950s rock and roll. Like the whole soundtrack is like 50s rock,
because Christine is
60s rock,
like a 50s car or something, right? I don't forget what kind of car.
It's a Plymouth Fury, if I remember right.
Beautiful car, whatever she is. I don't know, but that's a very cool movie. Very good. Same kind of cool mood as Eddie and the Cruisers, but scarier.
Yeah, and definitely we should do an episode on Stephen King adaptations too, because there were a million of them in the 80s, and this was one of the better ones.
And
for
two big ones that were really good this year. So that's really something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was also on my list of unsung gems. I think we're probably thinking about the same movie, which is The Dead Zone.
I didn't catch that one. I was talking about Cujo.
Cujo, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Three this year.
Yeah, I guess it was a big year for Stephen King.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Dead Zone is a movie where Christopher Walken plays a man who is in an accident, goes into a coma. When he comes out of the coma, he has this strange psychic power that allows him to see how people are going to die when he touches them. And what's interesting about it, it's David Cronenberg again, the guy that directed Videodrome, which we talked about in the last episode. It's a very moody, sad, kind of bleak, kind of into the world feeling movie with like gray skies and all the trees that don't have any leaves on them. It's like set in the autumn. And
it's a New England sense of place here for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And when his character wakes from the coma, he finds that the woman he was going to marry she's
got a whole new life.
It's years later. And so she's got a whole new life with
decades, I think. Yeah.
With a new husband. I think she even has a kid.
Yeah,
and
she does. Yeah.
It's just so sad. And essentially this power he's been given is a curse, and it kind of like destroys his life even further. And it's really there's a lot of pathos in it for a horror film. And it's also, I think, one of the better Stephen King adaptations. And Christopher Walken's really good in it. And if you like subscribe to this idea of Christopher Walken as just this kind of like caricature of an actor who like does the same thing and is just a weird guy in the sort of Nicolas Cage vein.
Right.
Like this is one of the movies you can watch and you can be like, wow, he was really, I mean, I'm sure he's still a good actor, but like he's considered like a number of actors like Gary Busey or Cage or some of these guys too.
He's got a rep.
Their persona has like somehow gotten bigger than their, performances.
Yeah, that's probably
he's probably one of those, but he's so good in it.
Yeah, he is. It's a really great movie. I would recommend that one. Definitely.
Did you have any other unsung gems you wanted to mention?
Let me see. Well, I mean, Educating Rita. I like that one a lot. That's Michael Caine and I can't remember the woman.
Julie Walters.
Did that, Julie Walters. And I've only seen it once, but I remember really liking it a lot.
It was part of the OG 100.
Oh, okay. That we talked about that last time, I believe.
You will have to go back
and
some
hear about the OG 100
to find out what that means to me.
You'll have to remind us what I don't quite remember what Educating Rita is about, but I remember really liking it.
I don't either, to be honest. It's about I don't know. I want to say he's
a professor or something.
And he's like tutoring her or something.
And
she's
I forget
an adult
why he's tutoring her. Yeah, she's a non-traditional adult.
It's kind of a romantic comedy.
Yeah. I just remember liking
it as
sort of a
charming,
quality, like
low key.
Yeah. And I like a low key quality romantic comedy. So there you go. It was good. I don't think I have anything else.
The only other one on my list was a movie that I don't think anybody knows about, which is called Nate and Hayes.
Oh, I was wondering if you were going to talk about Nate and Hayes.
Which is a pirate movie.
Yep.
And it comes from an era, I think I probably gave it more credit than it deserves back in the day because like any little kid, I was hungry for pirate movies, and they just didn't make them in the 80s. Like the pirate movie was with Christy McNichol, like as close as you could get. So there just were not a lot of like, not that Nate and Hayes is serious, because it's just this sort of rollicking Indiana Jones style goofball movie. But, it's a pirate movie with Tommy Lee Jones as a pirate. And, if that kind of thing sounds good to you, then you would probably like it. Written weirdly by John Hughes.
Oh, is that
another
right?
John Hughes screenplay. Yeah, his only action movie as a screenwriter. You wouldn't know it to watch it. You would never like watch it and be like, this is obviously written by John Hughes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a super dumb movie, but if you like pirates and you like Tommy Lee Jones as kind of a swashbuckler, tearing it up through the South Pacific, you might enjoy it.
Yeah. I do just want to mention one thing that looks like happened this year was that there are a couple of like Bowie movies that came out this year. One I haven't seen and one I have. The Hunger was earlier this year. He's not in a lot of that movie, which I was disappointed to find out when I finally saw it. But The Hunger and Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, which I have not seen, but I just wanted to mention a couple of Bowie movies this year.
Yep.
Worth mentioning.
Yeah, he had a little career as an actor.
Yep.
Certainly made some strange movies, of which The Hunger was one.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about him in a few years here, in a few more episodes.
In a few more episodes, he'll definitely come up.
When we get to Labyrinth.
Yep.
What about rewindable moments? Did you have favorite scenes?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, some of these are from movies we haven't discussed yet, so I don't know if we want to bring them up or not yet. Actually, most of my remindable moments are from kind of B movies, or not B movies,
Yeah.
but it's so bad at
I mean, some of mine are too. Some of them are from movies we've discussed. I love the scene where they write the song On the Dark Side.
I had that too.
In Eddie and the Cruisers.
And pretty much all the music performances in Eddie and the Cruisers.
But it's a cool scene to see. It's not something you see portrayed that often, the writing of a song and how a song kind of develops by each person making a contribution to it in a band. And there's a scene in Eddie and the Cruisers where that happens, and it's just kind of fascinating to watch on top of just being a really fun musical sequence.
Yep.
The scene in Mr. Mom where they race.
The three-legged race.
They have that goofball obstacle course.
Yeah.
Martin Mull versus Michael Keaton.
Yeah, that's
a
pretty
fun
great
scene. The whole Wally World sequence with John Candy in National Lampoon's Vacation. So if people don't know the story, the original ending of National Lampoon's Vacation was that they got to Wally World and it was closed, like it is in the movie. And then they're so angry that they go, or Clark is so angry that he drags his family to Roy Wally's house. And there's a hostage situation there where they take Roy Wally hostage.
Yeah.
And the audience didn't like it because they watched the whole movie with this sort of mission to go to Wally World, and then they don't get there, essentially. And so they went back and reshot the ending, and so they could go into Wally World, and they hired John Candy on a moment's notice. They paid him $1 million for a couple of days' work, which was a lot of money. I mean, it's a lot of money now, but in 1983.
Even more back then, yeah.
But I got to say, it's like money well spent because he's hilarious, and he really makes the ending of the film like better than it would be otherwise. But yeah, the whole Wally World scene is great. There's a bunch of scenes in Risky Business.
I was just going to say,
like among my
should
favorite
talk about
scenes ever. The opening credits with that like purple neon text over that
Chicago.
slow motion shot of Chicago with the Tangerine Dream music and the L train trucking along. It's just hypnotic. And then the sex scene on the train.
The Love on a Train
is great.
Great.
With In the Air Tonight, the Phil Collins song.
Oh, is that? Oh, okay.
And then the Porsche going into Lake Michigan.
Oh my God.
That is one of those scariest scenes
really
ever,
great,
watching that Porsche slowly go into Lake Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
The scene in the Dead Zone where the kids' hockey team falls through the ice.
Yes, that's a great
He saw
scene.
it coming, and the father of the kid in the hockey game wouldn't believe him.
Yeah.
He's like, and he picks up his cane and he like shatters a vase, and he goes, "The ice is going to break." Like, it's just this wild. It's like if I could do a Christopher Walken, like that's the line I would do. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a scene in Christine that I absolutely love where the bullying punks have destroyed Christine, and Artie steps in front of the car.
Artie's the main character.
Yeah, and the headlights come on, and there's like, it's back. So you see Artie from the back. It's beautifully shot. He's in silhouette, and he just goes, "Show me." And then you see the car repair itself.
Yep.
Like it goes from being utterly totaled to being
cool.
pristine.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, it's shot in like all kinds of clever ways. I watched a documentary about how they did it.
Because of course they couldn't do any of that with CGI back then, so that was all practical. Very cool stuff. Yeah.
And the other three I had noted are all come from B movies. And so let's talk about, because there were some golden B movies that came out in the second half.
Well, I'll just
83.
mention one more legit rewindable scene. I don't quite remember where this happens, but isn't there a great moment in The Right Stuff where all the astronauts are like walking together in their suits? I don't know if it's to the rocket or through a hangar or something, and that's a very cool
a hero moment
that I just thought I would mention.
My favorite scene in that movie, there's a scene where they're sitting in a lab, they're doing all the testing.
Oh Oh, yes. I think I know what you're... Yeah, that's a great scene.
And they're blowing into these straws that are keeping these like balls elevated in these tubes of water.
Testing their breath control or their how long they can...
It's lung capacity,
lung capacity,
assume.
Right.
And it turns into it because these are the kind of guys that they're all test pilots from the Navy, essentially. Like, and so they're just these pilots. Like hyper masculine macho guys where everything is competitive. Yeah. And they turn it into this big competition.
That is a great
where they're all trying to keep the ball elevated. Yeah, it's a
great show don't tell, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's a very funny scene, and it's very like demonstrative of what makes that movie kind of charming and fun to watch.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, so B movies.
Okay.
There were some great ones.
Yes. You start.
Some of my all-time favorite B movies came out in the second half of 83.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where do you want to start?
Yeah. I'm guessing like most of these movies I introduced you to, probably.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, all of them. These have all, you've introduced me to all of them. Well, do we start with Staying Alive or Revenge of the Ninja?
I have a list of like 12 here. I'm kind of wondering how many you could guess.
Okay, well, Revenge of the Ninja for sure. Love Revenge of the Ninja. So many rewindable moments there. Staying Alive, same.
Hang on. Revenge of the Ninja.
Yes.
Is a Canon Films movie. We talked about Canon a couple episodes ago. They were this B movie production company of these two Israeli cousins, and they were really big on hopping on current trends and trying to milk them for everything they were worth with these kind of low budget exploitation movies. But they were also pretty good at like launching trends themselves. And the two biggest trends of the 80s that these guys kicked off, one was breakdancing movies. They made Breakin', which begat a lot of other sort of hip-hop movies and dancing movies and breakdancing movies. And they also kind of invented the idea of the ninja as a movie. I mean, they didn't invent it. It was around in classic kung fu cinema, but they mainstreamed it. And they did it first with this movie called Enter the Ninja a few years prior to this. And then the sequel, the unofficial sequel to that movie, which is called Revenge of the Ninja, which starred the top martial artist from Japan at the time, a guy named Sho Kosugi, who choreographed all of the action scenes. Made in Salt Lake City for like $5. And it is just, it's a masterpiece of like, of using the resources available to you to be with the most efficiency and to the greatest sort of creative extent that you can. And I know that it's a dumb movie, but I'll put it up against just about any action movie from the 80s because there's just a lot of creativity in it, and the action sequences in it are just like jaw-droppingly impressive.
I mean, I almost put this as a hidden gem. Not more, but it is a B movie. But I mean, it's wonderful. I love Revenge of the Ninja. I will watch it. I mean, this doesn't seem like a thing that I would be into, but I love it. It's great. And I mean, Sho Kosugi was kind of like Jackie Chan before Jackie Chan. He did all his own stunts. He choreographed all the stunts. I mean, they're astonishing.
I mean, it's the other way around. Jackie Chan was doing this long before.
Oh, was he?
Sho
Okay,
Kosugi
I'm sorry. I didn't know
it.
that. I didn't become aware of Jackie Chan till later in my life. So,
no, Jackie's been doing this forever.
Okay, sorry, Jackie.
But but Kosugi's like his.
It's a similar thing though. Sho is a similar.
Yeah, his action sequences. I mean, they're not really in the same. Jackie Chan's are kind of built around comedy. He's almost like a modern day Buster Keaton.
That's true.
And Kosugi's were really more about showcasing the martial arts and.
Right.
I don't know, they're just it's
all
just a different
I'm saying
beast.
is they both do astonishing stunts.
Yeah.
Practically on their own. Like it's insane. Really good stuff.
Yeah. So and it's a movie full of blank squares.
Yes.
Yeah. Every other scene is a blank square, maybe. It's just it's wild. So what's your favorite scene? Because I had a hard time trying to decide.
What do you even pick? Well,
it's an episodic movie that, like a lot of martial arts movies, is just kind of one fight after another, and the whole movie is kind of about getting the hero from one fight to the next fight with the thinnest of narrative threads.
Yeah.
But those fights are so great that they each become almost like little miniature films within the film.
I mean, there's the one we watch over the most, which is the fight in the park with the quote unquote gang.
The village people.
Yeah, they're basically dressed like the village people.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's also Grandma Ninja.
Granny
There's
Ninja
a grandma
was another
character
one.
who you don't find out until 3/4 of the way through is also a ninja.
She is a ninja. So that's,
and
I had that
the final
also.
fight, which takes place entirely on the rooftops of these skyscrapers in downtown Salt Lake City. And it lasts maybe 20 plus minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just there's just so many cool twists and turns in it, and so many ideas that you won't see in any other movie.
I also thought the car chase where he, shows.
Oh my God, the car chase sequence is incredible. Yeah. And it's one of those scenes where you're like, the movie was made for $5, so somebody is just doing the things that you're looking at, kind of like those Australian exploitation movies of the 70s, where you're like, they just paid somebody to do that.
Most of the people in that scene are doing what you see them do.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
You're unsure watching it how somebody
are they
going to
be okay
during the making of it. It's that kind of sequence. So anyway, Revenge of the Ninja. What was the next one you mentioned? Oh, Staying Alive.
Staying Alive, yeah.
Oh my God. Well, tell them what Staying Alive is.
Staying Alive is the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, which is wild. It's nothing like Saturday Night Fever as far as I can tell, except that it has John Travolta as its lead and he dances. But that's about where it ends. He's gone over the bridge to New York to become a Broadway dancing star, I guess, and trying to make it big. And this movie's about him trying to make it big.
Yeah,
in a way.
What else? Directed by
Sylvester
Stallone, who has a hilarious cameo.
I put that as a short rewindable moment. There's a moment where you can see Sly in a crazy fur coat just walking down the street. Yeah.
It's bananas. It's a movie. I'm not sure it knows what it wants to be, but it's like a movie that coasts on the charm of John Travolta.
Yeah,
because he spends the entire movie doing horrible things to people.
He's such a jerk in this movie.
And you're meant to like feel for him and root for him. And
instead
he's like the biggest prick ever.
Yeah, he's a jerk.
You just like, if you actually knew this guy, you would want to push him in front of a train. Like he's so obnoxious and he's such a jerk.
Yeah.
But like you can't, this is the power of John Travolta. You sort of can't help but also root for him at the same time.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, he's charismatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is full, instead of the Bee Gees, this one had the composing style of Mr. Frank Stallone. So it's just a very different, very different beast.
Different.
And it's weirdly, compulsively watchable and fun.
Oh, yeah. And the wonderful Cynthia Rhodes is in it. Let's mention her, the wonderful actress, dancer.
But it's a terrible movie. It's a total guilty pleasure.
It's a guilty pleasure, 100%.
Yeah.
With many rewindable moments.
Yeah. What other guilty pleasures do you have?
Anything
else?
Jaws 3D.
Jaws 3D.
Yeah. Which
it's basically Jaws set in SeaWorld.
Yep.
Which I don't know why SeaWorld allowed this to happen.
They use the name SeaWorld and everything. It's not like a fake SeaWorld.
No, it's not even a fake SeaWorld. It's the actual SeaWorld.
Yeah, I don't know how they got away with that, but they did.
Yeah. It's crazy. I saw Dennis Quaid in an interview not too long ago where somebody asked him what 80s movie had the most cocaine on the set. And he said it was Jaws 3. And it kind of seems like it when you're watching the movie. It's pretty wild, the stuff that happens in it. It's just crazy. It's a long way from the original Jaws, but but I don't know how you could watch it and not have fun.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's so much fun. So it's Dennis Quaid. It's who else is in this?
Bess Armstrong, Lou Gossett Jr. Lou Gossett Jr. like right off of his Oscar win for Officer and a Gentleman.
Right?
So he took his Oscar and then he went and made Jaws
3D. Yeah, there's a lot of fun in this movie. It's a good time, and it was in 3D, and you can tell the moments that are supposed to be 3D.
Oh God, the effects look horrible on television. Yeah, it looks like it looks like South Park animation,
like slapped on top of
a cardboard cutout of a shark on a stick being paraded across the bottom of the frame.
That's how
bad it looks.
Yeah. But don't let that
Yeah,
scare
don't let
you
that
away.
stop you
It's
from
super
seeing it
fun.
because it
It's
is
super
it
fun.
is really fun and really strange.
Yeah, if you don't mind that sort of thing, it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
What else did you have?
Well, I think you're going to want to talk about this one. You're the hunter from the future.
Oh man.
Let's hear about that one.
Yeah. So you're the hunter from the future, not you are the hunter from the
No,
future, but
that's his
YOR,
name.
comma, the hunter from the future
Yep.
was a terrible ripoff simultaneously of both Conan the Barbarian and Star Wars.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Because the first half of the movie first 2/3 of the movie is set in this kind of Conan-like world where he's battling dinosaurs and cavemen. And then the last third of the movie, he's on a spaceship fighting aliens and robots.
Yeah, it takes a turn.
Yeah.
It takes a turn.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it is it's terrible, but it's just if you like so bad it's good movies, it's one of the best.
Definitely one of those.
It is super fun. It was actually it was made entirely in Italy by an all Italian crew and almost all Italian cast, even though it's in English. It was made, I think, as a mini series for Italian television, and it was 4 hours long. And then they cut it down to like the 85 minutes that comprises the movie.
Yeah.
And it feels like it.
I mean, yeah.
Because it feels like there's these wild jumps where you're like,
what?
Did I miss something? Where are they now?
That's right.
What's happening? Why is he fighting a Stegosaurus? And now we're on a spaceship? What's going on? Like the whole movie is kind of like that, but in a way that's kind of delightful and charming.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you told me that it used to be an episodic TV show, I was like, oh, it finally all makes sense. But not really. It doesn't make sense. I promise.
It turns out this was the back half of 83 was kind of a banner time for bad sword and sandals kind of movies. Because we had a few others.
Yeah.
So we had Hercules, the Lou Ferrigno movie, which is really rancid. I mean, it is horrible. It's also super fun.
Yeah.
They didn't let the fact that they only had $12 to make the movie stop them from doing wall-to-wall special effects.
God bless them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the movie where I was trying to think of my favorite moment from it. And I think most people would say it's the scene where he throws a bear into outer space, which is hard to beat. But my favorite moment is when he ties a boulder to the front of a chariot, and then he climbs in the chariot and throws the boulder so hard that it tugs the chariot and rockets him across space and time.
Actually, most of the moments I only really know one moment from this movie, which is when he like walks across the rainbow for some reason.
There's like a rainbow bridge in space that he strolls across.
So most of the memorable moments take place in space? That's strange.
Yeah, well, it kind of like,
I mean, I guess
it's idea of like the gods as Zeus and Andromeda and all the gods, but they like hang out on like an island in space.
Yeah, Olympus.
It kind of looks like the moon.
Yeah, it's Olympus, I assume.
It's indescribably weird. It kind of feels like they had a script in English and then they translated it into another language and then back into English and then made the movie. It's like, I think it's also Italian for the most part. Like the Italians made a ton of exploitation ripoffs in the 80s. There were like a lot of Italian Mad Max ripoffs that are not worth talking about.
Yeah, I don't know those.
Most of the movies that came out of Italy that were kind of exploitation movies in that era were not good. But Hercules is fun to watch.
Yeah.
There was another one by I think Ralph Bakshi, the great animator who did Fritz the Cat. Did a rotoscoped sword and sandals adventure movie called Fire and Ice.
Oh.
It's an animated film.
Okay.
That's quite fun. It looks like a Frank Frazzetti painting come to life. Frazzetti is the illustrator that did like the Conan paperbacks.
Oh,
he's the guy that kind of made famous that aesthetic of like, the bodice ripping women and the muscular man with the sword held aloft and the dragons and that kind of heavy metal look. So it's a cool movie to look at. Metal Storm was a kind of a Star Wars / Mad Max ripoff from oh boy, my brain is like mush right now. Blanking on the filmmaker's name, but he made a million bad exploitation movies in the 80s. And it was it's a 3D movie, and I find it quite charming and fun, even though it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Early Kelly Preston movie.
Okay.
With a much bigger budget, the other end of the budget spectrum, Kroll.
I was hoping you were going to bring up Kroll.
Yeah, I love Kroll.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, I loved it as a kid. I don't know if I saw it for the first time today, if I would think it was any good at all. But as a kid, it was just a great space opera. And I'm not alone, because there's a fan base for that movie out there. If like you look that movie up on the internet, there are people that really, really love Kroll.
I mean, you brought me to Kroll. I came to it late, and I think it's charming and enjoyable. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it
has this great like James Horner score. It's like one of his best scores.
Maybe just explain what Kroll's about.
It's kind of a like, sci-fi meets sword and sorcery epic about a prince who has to go save a princess from a monster. I mean, it's pretty simplistic. He kind of he builds an army as he travels to the kingdom of the monster. Like Liam Neeson is in there, and Robbie Coltrane, and a lot of like great British character actors. Like he recruits like a budding wizard and a cyclops, and it's a movie. It's like perfect for 12-year-old boys.
There's a moving castle in it too, which is kind of fun and innovative and different.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. The castle that the beast is holding the princess in moves every 24 hours.
Yeah, so you don't know where it's going to be.
And they don't know where on the planet it's going to be.
Yep.
And they don't know how they can get to it before it moves again. And the way they solve that problem is actually really cool. It also has one of the coolest weapons ever in a movie, which is this sort of like, I don't know how you would describe it. It's like a giant brass.
It's like a disc, and it has
sort of. It's like a almost like a throwing star, like a giant
eventually
brass
it
throwing
becomes
star.
one, right? It's like a disc, and then it not shoots up, but it like 5 different knives kind of come out of it. And
it's called the glaive.
It's called the glaive. Yeah.
Here's how much I love Kroll. Lisa bought me a glaive Christmas ornament some years ago.
I did. Yeah. Well, I thought, what could be
one
better?
One of the old Christmas trees that's got a glaive on it every year, which I think is great. Really quick, couple other movies. Class, which is a fun kind of B movie, teen movie with Andrew McCarthy and Rob Lowe. Nightmares, which was a anthology horror movie, which is actually pretty fun. Has a great segment with Emilio Estevez facing off against an arcade game that he plays, that he gets sucked inside of, essentially. Or actually, the arcade game kind of comes out of the arcade and hunts him through the arcade.
Oh, so it's like Tron in reverse.
Yeah, it's cool. Turkey Shoot, which is an Australian exploitation classic by our friend Brian Trenchard Smith. Kind of a take on Most Dangerous Game. And it's got some blank squares in it. I don't know what. I would love to pick Brian's brain sometime about what was going on the set that they ended up shooting some of the really wild stuff that is in that movie. It's also a surprisingly brutal movie.
Yeah.
But it's fun. So why don't we do the rundown of the Oscars and the top 10 box office?
Okay, great. So let's do, you want box office first? Let's see. Sure. Okay, the top 10 box office for 1983. Bring that up here. Where is it? Okay, here we go. Number 10, Risky Business. Number 9, Mr. Mom. Number 8, Staying Alive. Staying Alive grossed more than Risky Business. That's wild.
I thought Staying Alive was a flop.
Apparently not.
Wow.
It's at number 8.
Interesting.
Number 7.
It is interesting, like the narratives that form around some of these bad movies, like that, that are kind of notoriously terrible. And part of what it gets attached to them is that they were some kind of like giant bomb.
Like economic
and
flop.
Oftentimes that turns out to not be true at all.
Turns out it made almost as much as Mr. Mom. I mean, they made about the same amount of money. Sudden Impact at number 7. Octopussy at number 6. War Games at number 5. Trading Places at number 4. Flashdance at number 3. Terms of Endearment at number 2. And take a guess at what was number 1? Return of the Jedi. Number 1. So those were the highest grossing films. Yeah, that's right. Jabba in the house. So those were the top 10 box office. And let's take a look at the Oscars of 1983. All right. So Best Picture was Terms of Endearment. Best Actor was Robert Duvall from Tender Mercies, which we talked about in the last episode. Best Actress Shirley MacLaine for Terms of Endearment. Best Supporting Actor Jack Nicholson from Terms of Endearment. Supporting Actress Linda Hunt from The Year of Living Dangerously. And Director James L. Brooks for Terms of Endearment, who most of us know from other things, but there he was.
The Simpsons and many other things.
And so many other TV things.
Yeah, Cheers.
And the best song, the Oscar for best song went to Flashdance, What a Feeling, sung by the wonderful Irene Cara. So that was 1983 at the Oscars.
Yeah. What about your personal top 10?
Ooh, okay. Well,
a reminder again to our audience so they don't get mad at us that this is not our sort of idea of what the objective best films of that year were. These are just our favorite movies.
Yeah, and you have to remember that my top 10 usually comes from a place of stuff I just like to watch over and over again. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm not claiming these are like the best movies, as you'll see. Probably pretty controversial.
No, me too. I've got some movies that I think there's a few on my list that people probably would consider to be outright bad movies, but I love them, and so I don't care.
Right, okay. So 10, I've got Monty Python's Meaning of Life. 9, I've got Mr. Mom. 8, Christine. 7, Vacation, National Lampoon's Vacation. 6, Revenge of the Ninja. Yes, I know, but I love it. 5, Tender Mercies. 4, Eddie and the Cruisers. 3, Max Dugan Returns. 2, Risky Business. And 1, Valley Girl.
Cool.
Yeah. I have some honorable mentions too, but let's go with you.
We
first.
have some similar movies here.
Yep.
In fact, most of them. Just in slightly different orders. My number 10 was Christine. My number 9, Eddie and the Cruisers. 8, Lone Wolf McQuade.
Yeah.
Number 7, Krull. Number 6, Revenge of the Ninja. Number 5, Valley Girl. Number 4, A Christmas Story. 3, National Lampoon's Vacation. 2, Max Dugan Returns. And number 1, Risky Business.
Yeah. Interestingly, we both had Revenge of the Ninja at number 6.
Well, there you go.
Very interesting.
It's a solid number 6.
A solid number 6 in our house. Yeah.
Here's my honorable mention list.
Yeah.
The Right Stuff.
Yep.
Jaws 3, Trading Places, The King of Comedy, Videodrome, and The Outsiders.
Yeah, I also had The Right Stuff and Jaws 3D. I put Staying Alive there because it's so fun. Jedi, War Games, Educating Rita, and Krull.
Yeah.
Again, stuff I like to rewatch.
I should really have, it's so funny, like Star Wars, I should have Return of the Jedi on my top 10 somewhere because I love that movie. I grew up watching it so many times. I wore the tape out. It's just almost,
it
almost exists outside of movies in some ways. I don't even think about it as a movie. It's like, of course, it's like the greatest thing ever made. And so it's so, in some ways, it just feels uninteresting
to talk about
address it.
Yeah. It's like a taken as read kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Cool. Well, there's 1983. So I think next year is going to be the toughest year because I feel like maybe I'll be wrong as we look at these look at the back half of the 80s, but I feel like 84 might be the peak year for great commercial cinema in the 80s. But
I mean, there's been books written about that, right?
That's true.
So we're not the only people who.
I'm not sure there's been a book written about the movies of 84.
I guess I just mean 1984.
But there have been books about music in 84.
What a year that was for so many things. So we may have to break that up into more than 2. We'll see. But that's going to be a big year.
We can call them like supersized episodes.
Supersized episodes.
I mean, this one is. For the first time, we've gone over an hour here.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So if you're still listening to this, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cool. We'll see you next time. See you in 1984.
See you in 1984.
Bye now.
You've been listening to The Long Rewind. The program is produced by Dustin Morrow and hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli. If you enjoy the show, please consider hitting the subscribe button, leave us a good review on your podcast app, and tell your friends about the program. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.